So welcome everybody and good evening. As is our practice, we dedicate the learning that we do in this Shaar to the Chatufim, to our families who are being held in Hamas terror dungeons, and in the hope of our Zechut that they will be released soon. We also are learning in the Zechut of the Cholim and the Pitzuim, or Chayalim who have been injured on the field of battle. And also for the safety of our Chayalim, may they come home victorious and safe to their families, our children and grandchildren, and for a complete and utter victory over what is today's modern day Amalek, Biyachad Ninatzeach. So my goal tonight is to finish the second gate, the second Shaar, Shaar HaBechina, and to begin the next gate, or at least introduce it. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I am famously unsuccessful at meeting my goals when it comes to this in the Shaar, but we will try. Okay, but in order to do that, we have a couple of items that we need to finish up and wrap up, so we have a full idea of the Shaar HaBechina. Now, just to remind everyone of the context and what we're learning, is that the Chovot HaLevavot, for those who are new, is a sefer that was written in the 11th century by a Rabbi Ibn Pakuda, who was looking for a way to accomplish what I'm calling the emotional mitzvot. Mitzvot like loving God, mitzvot like trusting God, mitzvot like loving fellow men, things that you can't measure, and they are in the heart. So the question is, how do we know we've done it? How do we do it right? And he looked for a sefer to teach him that. He couldn't find it, and after some self-examination, he decided to write it on his own. And it has endured the test of time in terms of being something that speaks to us today, even though it was written so long ago. Where we are in the Sefer is that the foundation of this task that we set out really lies on two things. One is understanding that there is God, a God in the world, and trying to discern his awesomeness, what we call his gadlut or his romamut. And also, because of that, appreciating how much he does for us as individuals every single day. And that everything we have and everything we are really comes from him. And we have to find this in ways that are obvious and in ways that are not so obvious. So we're continuing our discussion on how we can know God and understand his chesed towards us, right? How can we fathom the unfathomable, right? How can we know his power, his majesty? And the Chovot HaLevavot says that the only way you can really do that is by looking at our universe and in it to see his presence and his impact, to see how he designed it, how he put it together, and once we have a sense of that, multiplying that up, because what we can see is only a shadow of what he really is. And this is the work of the second gate, the Shaar HaBechina, right? And the section where we need to look tonight is at the obvious in terms of what is in front of us, and some of the things that are not so obvious. So last time we said that Ibn Pakuda said that our investigation to discover the Kodesh Baruch Hu really falls into 7 different categories, and we should have that on our checklist to pay attention to them. Right? He calls each of these areas signs of wisdom, meaning areas of study where we can discover the different aspects of the Kodesh Baruch Hu's wisdom. And we need to keep in mind that what we are going to see is really like the shadows on Plato's cave. They're not the reality itself, it's what we can see based on living in this world. So Plato's cave, for those of you who were forced to take Greek philosophy, is where there were people who could only see reality based on reflections or shadows from the fire behind them. That's what we can see in terms of the reality. I will guarantee you there are few shiurim that quote Plato, so we are one of the lucky ones. Okay, so here they are. So one is the signs of wisdom inherent in the basic elements of the physical world. So we would call this investigation things like geology and chemistry. Signs of wisdom inherent in humans, which is the apex of his creation. And we said this was a little less clear to us what Ibn Pekuda is suggesting. And we brought one of two ideas, one from the Khatam Sofer, that says that we were created as a microcosm of the world to teach us that just as all of our body is interconnected, and if you take a hammer and you hit your hand, you hit the whole body, so too the whole world is interconnected, and if you destroy or damage the world, you really damage everything. The other, which is I think a more interesting idea to me, is the Ravid, who suggests that when we say that that we are created in the image of God, it means that all of us has the potential for creation. All of us reflects and has this sense of gadlut. And if we want to see an idea of what God is about, we have to look at man's potential. Right? Man's potential here for good and for creativity. I don't think we have reached anywhere near man's potential, and I think thinking about it will allow us to kind of understand the gift that he gave us and the ability that he has. The third is talking about man physically, spiritually, mentally. The fourth gate of wisdom is inherent in looking in other species from large to small, right? We would call this the study of zoology. Also, he talks about the signs of wisdom inherent in plants or botany, the signs of wisdom inherent in the various sciences and the disciplines that we have. And he talks about mathematics, and he talks about music, and he talks about all the creative sciences that we take credit for, but they're really, the source is the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Somebody sent me an example of this German scientist who revolutionized chemistry because he had a dream of a snake catching his tail. And he looked at the snake and it was a sign of something. You can learn from that. I have no idea about the sciences, but the idea is that where does inspiration come from? It comes from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? And we have to appreciate what we can do as really gifts that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us. And the last sign is the wisdom inherent in the Torah. And this is the instruction book that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us so that we can have a relationship for him. And as Ibn Pekuda says, also offers us the ability to have a share in the world to come. So it's an interesting and diverse list of things that we should go out and explore and see through a God lens, if you will. So Ibn Pekuda is now going to ask, so where do you start? Right? The truth is that looking at each of these areas is a lifetime's work, right? Each will offer different insights. So in the end, if they're all going to get us to the same place from different angles, does it really matter? It's interesting, after most shiurim, somebody jumps up and quotes a Mishnah from Masechet Makot. They say, Rav Chananya ben Akashi Omer Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael lefichach hirba lehem Torah mitzvah shene'amar Adonai chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. The next word they shout out is Kaddish And then somebody says Kaddish. Kaddish is actually not part of that Mishnah. The question is, it says, Reb Hanania ben Akashya says, the Holy One, blessed be he, sought to confer merit on the Jewish people. Therefore, he increased for them Torah and mitzvot, as it says, it pleased the Lord for the sake of his righteousness to make the Torah great and glorious. So the question is, what does that mean? So the Rambam has an idea that says that the benefit of all of the mitzvot that we get is that whereas we can't do all of them perfectly, we can do one of them perfectly. We can pick out one or two and say, this is where I'm going to focus my attention. So, given that, right, maybe we should say to ourselves regarding these 7, whatever speaks to me, that's what I'll do. Right? Whatever my inclination is for. And on one level, the Chovot HaLevavot tells us just that, kind of. So if you look at source 1, it says, which class of evidences of divine wisdom, in other words, these signs of wisdom, is nearest to us, so that it is our duty to examine it more. Right? Meaning, which one should we start with? To this we reply, while the close study of each and every one of the 7 classes previously enumerated is necessary and obligatory, more, the evidence of divine wisdom which is nearest and clearest to us is that manifested in the human species, a microcosm of the universe, the closest cause, ultimate purpose to the existence of the larger world. In other words, we should look at all of them, but if you're looking for a place to start with what you know best. Start with yourself. Start with our world, right? And he says it's easiest to start closest to home. So, the rest of this next chapter, which is chapter 5, and it is a long chapter, deals with things we should consider about ourselves, where we can marvel about the gadlut of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So, just remember that this is not an exploration for exploration's sake. Ibn Pakuda sets out a goal for these investigations, and he says it's realizing the abundance of God's loving kindness and goodness towards him. He will be filled with the spirit of humility, submission towards the Creator, and his gratitude towards his Maker will abound. In other words, this exploration needs to create an emotional response. We need to realize what the Kadosh Baruch Hu is and what he does for us. Now, if I were writing this sefer, I would focus on the marvel of how the body works and interacts with the world and how it heals itself. And Ibn Pakuda does this actually in great detail. In fact, he not only looks at the interaction of the human body, but the process of how we come into being and how we develop and how we grow. Now, as you read this, now all we know about him is he is a Dayan. But his detail, when he talks about the human body and how it works, it is clear, at least to me, that he has had a good deal of medical or at least scientific training. So I recommend that if you get a chance, either go to safaria.com or to go to dafyomi.co.il and read this in detail. Right? But I just want to summarize and point out some of the ideas that may not be as obvious to us. So he starts out reflecting not on us per se, but after he talks about the process of birth, he focuses on the idea of parents, which is amazing. That the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the perfect process for us to be born, and he talks about how it is astounding that a mother's womb is the perfect place for birth, that it's safe, secure, all-encompassing, weatherproof, well-stocked, warm and cradling crib, right, where we stayed in, and when the infant is ready, the baby leaves the womb without any planning on its part, but through God's power. And he goes on to speak about nursing, etc., but he adds the following in source 3. God inspires the parents' hearts with kindness, love, and compassion for their offspring, so that raising it is not overly burdensome to them. They are more sensitive to his needs in regard to food and drink than to their own requirements. All the labor and trouble involved in bringing him up, bathing and dressing him, gently leading him and warding him off everything harmful, even against his will, is of little account to in their sight. Afterwards, the offspring passes from infancy to childhood. His parents do not tire of him, nor become angry at his numerous needs and little recognition of the burden which they bear in caring and providing for him. On the contrary, the concern they feel on behalf increases until he reaches adolescence, when he has already learned to speak correctly and properly, and in his physical senses and mental facilities have become strong enough to acquire wisdom and knowledge. Right? In the 11th century, by adolescence, they're already out in the world working. But if we think about it, when we think about the amazing thing the Kadosh Baruch Hu has set up, to set up this idea of parents, and to have within the parents this need and desire to care for their children is an amazing thing, that we take it for granted. And that's part of what the system that he set up says. He then goes on, actually in great detail, to the marvels of the body and all the biological systems. And as you read it, and he goes into listing all of the things, you get the sense that he's really saying, and what about this? And what about this? And have you thought about this? And did you know it works like this? Right? Just more and more and more ways of getting us to focus on looking deeper at things. Right? We can look things at the surface, but the more we ask questions and the more we notice, the more marvelous it becomes. Right? Now, I will leave you this part on your own. I know that we have all spent time in our lives thinking about the marvels of the human body, and I'll leave you to think about it. The next piece that he talks about are things that I didn't think about, and there are a little less obvious. So he goes on to talk about spiritual gifts, or really non-physical aspects of our existence that comes from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he suggests that how we see them is an indication of God's gadlut and his beneficence to us. So in keeping with his talent of being a great list maker, he lists out 6 things that are in this category. And here is where I want to concentrate most of today. So he says the ability to think, the ability to understand and perceive. He talks about memory. He talks about forgetfulness. He talks about shame. And he talks about speech. So before we go into each area, I want to remind us that he is providing us for a path to find him. He's not going to be giving us answers, so to speak, because they're by necessity limited. So as I'm going through the examples he gives and some that I have, I want you to think of other examples, right? Using your experience. His goal is to open our minds and to get us thinking. And as we go through it, the goal is threefold. One is to see the marvel in the things and how amazing the Kadosh Baruch Hu is. He wants to see how these things that he has given us not only benefit us in our lives, but are a bridge to connect to him. And he goes through these areas, and really everything he discusses, like I said, he wants to open our minds. And the homework for you is to go out and open your eyes and see the world through a God lens. Because whatever you look at, you can find it. So I'm going to go out a little bit out of order, and I'm going to start with memory, right? And it's interesting, we cannot live without memory. Memory is what allows us to grow from our experiences, experience is in itself the result of memory. Now, Ibn Pakuda brings memory as a transaction-based quality, and I'm going to read it, but it's more, and I want to suggest maybe some other things. So Chovot in source 4 says, take memory for instance. How much loss a person would suffer in all of his affairs if he were unable to remember what he owed, and what he owned and what he owed. What if he had taken what he had taken and what he had given, what he had seen or heard, what he had said and what had been said to him, if he could not remember the one who had done him a chesed, or the one who had brought him harm, the one who had rendered him a service or inflicted upon him an injury, a person would not recognize a road even if he had frequently traversed it, nor remember any wisdom though he had studied it all his lifetime. Past experience would not be of any benefit to him. He would not weigh any matter by what had happened in the past, nor could he estimate events by what was taking place in the present. Such a person would be almost entirely outside the class of human beings. Memory is what makes us human. But the truth is, without memory, we wouldn't be able to walk or talk or button our shirts. Memory is really what allows us to function. So in addition to memory, he wants to talk about the benefits of forgetfulness, forgetting, right? Which seems the opposite. Now, I have been blessed with this particular quality. But what he says is that the benefit of forgetting, and he brings it in a limited way, he says it's an alleviation of sorrow. He said, without the ability to forget, no man would ever be free from sorrow. No joyous occasion would dispel his sadness. The events that should bring him joy would bring him no pleasure. When he recalled the troubles in his life, even from the realization of his hopes, he could not hope to derive rest or peace of mind. He would never refrain from grieving. Now, we have the poster child example of that is Yaakov Avinu. When he heard that Yosef was taken by a wild animal, Tarof Taraf Yosef, the Torah tells us, Vayima'en lehitnachem. He refused to be comforted, right? And as a result, he mourned for Yosef 22 years. And it said that every day of those 22 years was like the first day that he heard. And the Meforshim asked, how is it possible when the Kadosh Baruch Hu has given us the gift of forgetting? Now, forgetting in this case doesn't mean forgetting completely, it means lessening of the pain, right? It means forgetting enough that we can go on with our lives. And they said, although it's a shiur for another time, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu took away this bracha and left him raw. And that's what the Chovot HaLevavot has said, that this benefit of forgetting is a bracha that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us so we can get on with our lives. But I think we can go beyond that too, right? Without forgetting, there would be no forgiveness in the world, right? People would just bear grudges. And if we didn't have forgetfulness, we'd always know where our car keys were. That's true. But it's a small enough price to pay for all the other benefits that we get from it. There's another idea that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability to forget so that we would always return to him. There's an idea that when we learn something, we have to keep going back to it, because learning is our way to communicate, or for the Kadosh Baruch Hu to communicate with us. And as soon as we learn something, we forget it. And that's by design, so we could always go back. If we had eidetic memory, then we wouldn't have to go back. Everything would be retained. So one of the ideas behind it is that this forgetfulness is a gift, so we keep coming back to him. Then, questions, comments?
It's just interesting. I was thinking of some extraordinary sort of autistic kind of people who have extraordinary memory, but then they often are missing some affect and feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one he talks about is shame. Now, it's counterintuitive for me that he put shame on this list. The Chovot HaLevavot says that shame is unique to human beings. Now, the American author Mark Twain, are you familiar with him? He was famous to say that man is the only animal who blushes or needs to. Right? There's a sense that shame is a negative quality, and in many places it is felt to be there. But Ibn Batuta doesn't see it this way. It is a mark of man's lowliness or a low station that he receives, but the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave it to us because he wants us to live a moral life. Here's what he says in source 5. Were it not for this feeling, shame, men would not show hospitality to strangers. They would not keep their promises, grant favors, show kindness, nor abstain from any evil in any way. Many precepts of the Torah are fulfilled only out of shame. A large number of people would not honor their parents if it were not for shame, and certainly would fail to show courtesy to others. They would not restore a lost article to their owner, nor refrain from any transgression. For whomever commits any of the disgraceful acts for which we have mentioned, not do so only when it has cast off the garments of shame. It's only when that shame here talks about our relationship to our fellow man and our wanting to belong to the society and to create norms that make us, if you will, behave. Now he notices that when we talk about shame, we're only talking about shame as it pertains to bein adam lechavero, as it pertains to our fellow man. He said shame is rooted in how we view ourselves in relation to others and how we think others might view us. It is our desire to be part of a group. And he wonders, why is it that we don't feel shame in terms of the Kadosh Baruch Hu? When we do something wrong, we just do it. We don't have the same sense of embarrassment that we have in terms of our fellow man. So he says, the reason for this is that a human being would not be forced into the service of God, whereby its reward would not be deserved. It is, however, our duty to feel shame in the presence of the Creator as a result of reflection, realization of the service we owe him, and our consciousness that he observes every day that we do openly or secretly. In other words, he is saying that if we felt shame compelling us to do the mitzvot, then we wouldn't have free will to want a relationship to him. He doesn't say we shouldn't have shame. He said we should learn it. And in fact, we have incorporated into many of our tefillot, but certainly on Yom Kippur, when we try to feel the sense of shame and regret, where it says, Rabba Baptar Tzlote Amar Hachi. So Rabba, this is after the Shmona Esrei, the different Rambanim would say different things. We've incorporated them in different places. He would say Elohai, my God. Ad shelo notzarti eini kedai, before I was created, I am worthless. V'achshav shenotzarti ki'ilu lo notzarti. And now that I have been created, it is as if I have not been created. I have not been created. And then he says, Afar ani b'chayai, I am dust in my life, kal bechov mer b'mitatai, all the more so in my death. Hare ani lefanecha, I am like before you, kikli malei busha uchlima, like a vessel full of shame and humiliation. And then he goes on to say, whenever I sin before you, please forgive me. But it's a sense of something that we need to learn. We need to accept the mitzvot. We need to say we want a relationship with God. And through that process, we will develop a sense of shame when we go wrong. In the Tomer Dvorah, sure.
No, I just want to know what your definition or his definition of shame is. Is it regret? Is it being sorry?
I would say it is a sense of regret and feeling sorry and a feeling of inadequacy. That's almost a physical sense that impacts on your behavior to do better. It is not, in this sense, a sense of feeling of low esteem and I'm not, right? It's something that will spur to prevent us from acting in the first place and spur us to do tshuva. In the West, shame is negative. But this actually I found after I had sent out the sources, but Rabbi Beryl Wine describes it this way, and I think it is worth going through it. It says, without a sense of shame, there can be no proper remorse for unjust and illegal behavior, nor can there be any hope for repentance and redressing wrongful behavior. The Hebrew words for shame and embarrassment often appear in our prayers and play a central role in our entreaties for the heaven's forgiveness, especially on Yom Kippur. The sense of shame also appears throughout the words of the prophets of Israel and the Psalms of David. Brazen behavior and attitudes are counted as being some of the worst character traits that can afflict a Jew. So shame is a positive trait, spiritually and morally speaking. The only question that arises is what should one be ashamed about? And here the line between shame and shameful is unfortunately often crossed in mock piety and hypocritical crocodile tears. Criminal and guilty behavior should leave one with a permanent sense of shame throughout one's life. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and later life retains just a slight stain. And when we feel these things, on the one hand, it should spur us to action. On the other hand, we should understand it's a gift from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it's something that he has built in us. And the duty to feel shame in the presence of the Borei Olam acknowledges the services that we owe him. Before we go on to speech. Okay?
I've got a question.
Sure.
What happens to those people who don't display any kinds of shame or don't feel shame? Does that make them not godlike if we're suggesting that it's bestowed by shame?
So,
or creatures of God?
well, being creatures of God, everybody's creatures of God. So that's, right, everybody's created B'Tselem Elokim. So everybody starts out kind of on the same level. So there are people who, through their actions or their change in attitudes, choose to cut off relationships with the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
What do you think of that? Think of someone like, for example, someone's quite a psychopath, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not choosing to be a psychopath, I'd imagine, you know, you form like that. So what then happens to the sense of shame there? Or someone who might be on the spectrum also might not have a sense of shame.
So I was thinking about that as I was putting together the Shaar. I was hoping no one would ask me that question. But it's a larger question because when they talk about, and we didn't spend time going through how the body works, what happens when the body doesn't work, right? And what happens when the body gets sick? And how do you relate to that event? As a lay person, the way I understand the individuals that you've described is they're sick. Their bodies don't work the way they're supposed to, or their minds don't work the way they're supposed to, if you conclude them both together, right? Human beings aren't supposed to be sociopaths or psychopaths. That's not a good thing, right? That means something is wrong, something is broken. And it's analogous to people who are sick and their bodies also don't work. Can people learn shame depending on what happens in their life? I hope so. Right? People who are sick, can they be cured? Sometimes. How do we understand that? I don't know. Does that? Anybody else before we go into speech? So we talked last week about speech and the marvel about communication, right? And I told the story about the Chofetz Chaim, which I will tell again because I like that story. That they his students of the Chofetz Chaim approached him in Radin, and they showed him a telephone for the first time. And they said to him, Rebbe, here's a telephone. You can stand in Radin and you can speak to somebody in Warsaw. It's a miracle. And the Chofetz Chaim said, no, that's not a miracle. The fact that I can speak here and you can understand me, that's the miracle. The other is just technology. The Ibn Pakuda, the Chovot HaLevavot, expands speech to mean communication. So he's talking about writing. The ability for us to write and to know how to write, and not only to know how to write in a way that somebody can read, leaving doctors aside, right? That we can record things for posterity and we have a history. We can understand and transfer our knowledge to somebody else. We can conduct business. We can get married. I mean, think about the impact of our ability to write or record our voices, instantaneously communicate. We would have no history without writing. Every generation would be new. We would have no background. So I'm going to put together thoughts and understanding because the way he addresses is pretty much the same. And he says that our ability to think and understand is what makes us human. It also is the foundational piece that allows us to have a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? And he gave us this ability just for that purpose, right? And we can now glimpse into God's wisdom. We can attend the Shaar, we can go out and look at the tree, right? And we can appreciate mercy and everything that God exhibits in this world. It gives us the ability to thank people and to express our emotions one to another. And it also makes us accountable, right? To explain what we've done, to understand what we've done, to have people tell us and apologize. So he lists a list of benefits to all of this. And he says this benefits of our understanding. We can interpret physically, of course, what our senses tell us, but understanding allows us to see beyond our physical senses. He says that our ability to understand and to think allows us to feel time, right? Which is not something that you can physically feel. The way he puts it is you can see the movement of the shadows on a sundial. That's how he understood the world. But we can understand the passing of time, right? We can understand between truth and lies. We can distinguish between excesses and deficiencies, between good and evil, between praiseworthy and disgraceful, between the necessary and the unnecessary, and the possible and the impossible. We can navigate in this world because we can think, right? We can also employ tools. We can make animals work for us. We can discern the movement of the planets and the sciences. I mean, all of this comes because he gave us the ability to think. And what we know about the mind is very little, right? We know a lot more than we did but what left to be explored in terms of the ability, what is it? They say that we use 1/10 of our abilities in terms of the mind and what the mind can do. And he goes on to say, as he makes his whole list, he said, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's just too much to go through. And as you think about this, you can add to this list, right? When you get a thought or a creative thought, pay attention to the thought and pay attention to where it came from. So he goes on to list other things we should think about in our world. Things that he says there's benefit to light. He said that's obvious, that we can have light and see where we're going. But he also says there's a benefit to darkness. He said that without darkness, we wouldn't have nighttime, we wouldn't have time to recuperate and to sleep and to time. He said without night, there would be unceasing daytime. And have anybody here been to Sweden or Norway or Alaska in the summer? It's a real problem for the people there because it's day all the time. And we were in Alaska one summer, and we landed at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and people were out mowing their lawns, right? Because for them, it was still daytime. So without the sense of darkness and night, and you would get night shades, not the poison, the thing you put on your windows, so that you could simulate night. It says we'd be unable to schedule appointments or celebrate time-dependent occasions like Shabbos and holidays. The question always comes up, how do you celebrate Shabbos there? And when the sun never goes down, even though there are halachic answers to it, it's always daytime. Right? When we were in Alaska, at least the sun went down at 2:30 in the morning. Right? So you said Mariv, you went to sleep, you woke up in the morning and you said Havdalah. There's also, he talks about, that we have to see the gadlus, things that we need, he made plenty of, and things that we don't need are in scarcer supply. So he says air is everywhere. A person can live 3 minutes without air. Everywhere you go on the planet, you can find air. We need water. A person can go 3 days without water. There's a plentiful supply of water, but it's not as plentiful as air. You can go, 3 weeks without food? So there is less food than there is water and air, but there's always something to eat available. I mean, barring things like famines and etc. And he talks about clothing, that whereas that is essential, there's always some way you can make clothing, although it is scarce. And then he gets to things like silver, gold, and precious gems, which are rare, because at the end of the day, we don't need them. I mean, we need them for our day-to-day living. My friend's mother used to say, I've been rich, I've been poor, rich is better, right? So I don't want to discount it completely, but it's not essential for us to continue as a species. He also talks about that we should consider politics. Now, I don't want to get into politics and governments, but on a grand scale, the fact that we can organize ourselves to protect ourselves, and that we have this idea that a ruler or a government is supposed to protect us and to govern us justly, and to be a servant of the law and the well-being of the people. I mean, that's amazing. First of all, it's amazing that he's writing this in the 11th century. He also says business is amazing. The fact that there is a common understanding that I give you money and you give me stuff, right, is not intuitive. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu has given us the wisdom to organize around this and to create the institutions. I mean, if you think about the banking systems, they're amazing. They're amazing at what they can do in order so that I can order on Amazon and get it delivered, right? In terms of me charging it and it going to a central bank and it's clearing in another bank and another. That's amazing, right? That's all wisdom that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave to us so that we could live in this world. And then he said the most amazing thing of all is Torah, that he has given us the ability to know what he wants from us, right? And it is the ultimate source to know that he wants a relationship with us. So if you think about it, he didn't have to let us know he was there. He could have let us live a full and happy life like in a terrarium, right? Completely enclosed, with him on the outside looking in. But he wanted a relationship with us, and he reached into the terrarium, if you will, to give us the instructions on how we should reach out to him. And not only that, but to us specifically as a people, he has demonstrated again and again and again kind of the miracles that he has performed for us. Now, we're at a very fortunate time of year. We are just starting Sefer Shemot, and we're now going to be reading about the miracles in Egypt. And we pay attention to them like we do at the Seder. Dam, Svardea, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shchin, Barad, Arbesh, Choshech. Right? Okay, got it. Take time and read what the Torah says happened. And the mastery of nature. When it comes to the Red Sea, take the time to read the Psukim and try and figure out how it actually happened. And there are lots of different theories, right? Because the Torah is not 100% clear, at least not to me. There are different ways to read it, and try and figure out how physically this took place. If you do that, when you go through and you say the Kili Olam Chasto, and it lists off all of these things, you will have a greater appreciation of what they are and what he has done for us. And then lastly, he said that the greatest thing that we can see the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the world is us. That we have existed 900 years, right? He's writing in 10 something, as a people. And not only have existed after exile, but we thrive. There are better times and worse times. But listen to what he says. If anyone this is source 8. If anyone seeks evidence at the present day similar to those mentioned, let him look with candid eyes at our position, that's us, Jewish position, among the nations since exile began, and our orderly condition in their midst, notwithstanding that we do not agree with them in their belief or practices. That means our relationship with the non-Jewish world, of which disagreement they are aware. They are very aware. That was me, that was not him. Observe that even so, our financial situation is close to theirs, and perhaps even better than theirs. And you will see that an average person among them must toil for more for his livelihood than the average or even below average among us. Meaning that if you look at Jewish communities around the world, we tend to be much better off financially than the rest of the world. Certainly than our neighbors. Since 1901, when it was established, to 2023, there have been 965 Nobel Prizes given out. How many of them were Jews? 214, 22% of the recipients. And we are 3% of the world?
Less.
Much
Less?
less.
So we're much, much less.
Yeah.
So think about what we are in terms of the population, and think about how the Kadosh Baruch Hu has allowed us to thrive. And if you go into terms of Jewish communities in different places of the world, and I know that waxes and wanes, but still, what Ibn Bakuda said in the 11th century is consistent and has been consistent all the way through. Now, when you read this, you get the sense that I've left a lot of things out, right? But what we should take away as the net message is to be overwhelmed. The purpose of this Shaar is for you to walk out overwhelmed and to understand what the Kadosh Baruch Hu has given us and who He is and His greatness. So the last chapter, in finishing the Shaar HaBechina, is so what? Right? What are we supposed to do about this? And he asks the question, why don't we do this all the time? Right? Given that we know most of this, right? And if I asked you intellectually before we started, you would probably tell me this, and there's nothing new, and I didn't see anybody drop their jaw and say, oh my God, I didn't know that. So why don't we do it? And he says that the short answer is that we're too busy. Right? We're too involved in our own day-to-day lives, and we don't have time, we don't take time, or more correctly, like I said, we don't take time. This, as a result, leads to indifference, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu and everything He gives us becomes like wallpaper. We know it's there, but we don't really pay attention to it anymore. Another aspect, he says, is it's an arrogance towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and a lack of gratitude. So a third barrier, he says, is that we don't like to go outside of our comfort zone. So I listed the 7 areas of wisdom, but we like to only look what's kind of in our neighborhood. We don't look beyond. And he says, and I'll ask you this, how many people here, I don't want to sign the hands, have opened a book or gone to a lecture on a subject they know nothing about, right? So they can just expand their knowledge and see the Kadosh Baruch Hu in a different way. We typically seek knowledge that we need. So I will tell you is that my exploration in learning Hebrew depends on what I need to do next. So if I need to take the car to the garage, I then go and learn all the words, lamim and masach, and all the words according to that, and those are the words I need. The words for things I don't have that experience for, I don't need it, I don't look for it because it's not important. But according to Ibn Pekuda, we should contemplate the awe-inspiring nature of God beyond our, he says, limits of our understanding. I would say beyond our comfort zone. Go into areas. My cousin started learning particle physics at 82 because he thought it would be a way for him to understand how God works in the world. He unsuccessfully tried to explain it to me, so I will just give him the credit. So the question is, how do we fix it? Right? What can we do to counter this and to understand God in the world and to recognize our obligation as well to serve Him? So this is my editorial input here. Because the truth is, we all do this sometimes. There are moments of inspiration that we have where the Kadosh Baruch Hu opens the curtain and we peek around to see inside. Sometimes it's standing on a mountain on a great vista. Sometimes it's holding an infant and we count 10 fingers and 10 toes and we marvel. But that inspiration fades. How many people here look at another individual and say, wow, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Isn't that a marvel? Probably, certainly not me. So we have to not only appreciate those moments of inspiration, but actively seek others, right? So when you go on your walks, think about what you're seeing and how it got there, and set your goal to discover something new every day, right? And the purpose of learning is to open a portal to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So when we reflect on text, so we're learning in mitzvot and musav, right? Understand not just the content, but the purpose of all this is so that we can communicate with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. I had attended a shiur that was very complicated, or at least it was very complicated for me, on the laws of Rebit, laws of interest. The purpose of the laws of Rebit are so that we treat everybody, every Jew, like family. That's the point. That's why we have the ban against charging fellow Jews Rebit. When you learn that, that should be in the back of your mind in terms of what is the goal. We put up a Reuven. Tell me why we put up a Reuven. Told you I wasn't going to finish.
Oh, we put up what?
An Eruv.
Oh, an Eruv.
Right, so you got to tell me so you can carry. But that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that we put up a Reuven so that we can treat everybody like a family, and we can all eat at each other's houses, carry from one place to another to bring us together as a family. That's the point. Carrying is a technical way we accomplish that. So as we learn the mitzvot, we have to understand why the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave them to us and focus on that. And how do you begin? Ask for help. Ask the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I'll tell you the story. There was a point where I was at a crossroads and I didn't know what to do. So I went to my rabbi and I said, what do you think I should do? And he said to me, how the heck should I know? I said, ask the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He knows you. He knows what you need. He wrote the owner's manual. What are you bothering me for? If we want to know how to do this, daven. Say, I need your help. And you'll get it. You'll get it. You will find he will show you the way if you pay attention. So as we start out on this journey, that's the best place to start. Say, I want to see you in this world. I want to appreciate it. I want a relationship. Show me where to find it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. And we will start the next Shaar of Avodat Hashem, which answers the question, now what? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll pick up a new Shaar next week.